Hello, and welcome to today's EHS Today webcast, How to Minimize Hazards in the Workplace, sponsored by Avetta. My name's Dave Blanchard. I'm the Editor-in-Chief of EHS Today, and I'm delighted that everyone has joined us today. Before we begin, let me just take a couple seconds and explain how you can participate in today's presentation. First of all, if you have any audio difficulties or your slides aren't advancing or something like that, if you just hit your F5 key, that will refresh your webcast console and it will clear up most of those problems. If you still have some technical difficulties during today's session, please press the Help button on your player console to receive assistance in solving common issues. This webinar technology will allow you to resize the presentation by clicking the Maximize icon or by dragging the lower right corner to enlarge the window. We welcome your questions during today's event. To submit your questions to today's presenters, simply type your question into the question window, which you'll see on the left side of your screen. Then hit the Submit button. We're going to try to answer as many questions as possible during the Q&A session that will follow the main presentation, but please feel free to send in your questions at any time and we'll add those to the queue. Now, please also be aware that today's session is being recorded and it will be available on the EHS Today website within the next week for you to review. You'll be notified by email when the archive is available. Now, this webinar is the third of a four-part OSHA series with EHS Today, and it's sponsored by Avetta. So at this time, I'd like to welcome Lori Canapi from Avetta. Let me tell you a little bit about Lori before I introduce her. Lori has over 20 years of health, safety, and environmental experience. She's a CSP, ASP, CLSC, and she's a certified DNV auditor, holds a master's training certificate for aerial working platforms and forklifts, and is a certified Rig Pass instructor. Lori is a member of several industry organizations, and she's currently the regulatory chairperson for the Gulf Coast Safety and Training Group, chairperson for Safe Gulf, chairperson for AP RPP8, a committee member for API RP75 Rewrite, and she's been a member of the American Society for Safety Engineers, which is going to change its name in about a month, for over 12 years. So with that, let me turn you over to Lori for a few minutes. Lori, go ahead.
Thanks, Dave, and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today to discuss how to minimize workplace hazards. One of the key ways to minimize hazards is, of course, to have a robust risk management program. Risk management is important in reducing injuries in the workplace. A strong and robust risk management program is key to a company's operations and safety record. Identifying, reducing, or eliminating the identified risks are critical to the success of the company's operations. A high rate of injuries, illnesses, and/or incidents can impact the company's reputation and their ability to secure work or retain valuable employees. It's important that a risk assessment be thoroughly evaluated throughout all aspects of the company's operations, even if they're running smoothly at that time. The risk management process should be evaluated periodically as any other process to verify the program is delivering the performance objectives as intended. By following that strong and robust risk management program, a company can reduce costs, reduce lost time, reduce loss of productivity, improve their safety record, and certainly improve the morale of their employees. Folks can get very downhearted when a company is not doing well or when their coworkers are injured. These are all key components to a good risk management program. When we're looking at the process, we need to consider variations. Variations within our risk management can be a variety of things. They can be a change in tools, tooling, equipment, processes, products, change in weather, personnel, new persons, and even a scope of work. Your work order could change, completely throwing everything awry, and we need to make sure that we have a process in place to handle that. When we're looking at some of these specialized tasks, we need to make sure that all our correct members of the team are there. We need to make sure that the folks involved Risk management assessment are the proper roles, responsibilities, and authorities to identify, eliminate, and/or reduce any potential hazards. Some risk management is standardized and some is specialized. Not all risk assessments are or should be the same. Smaller tasks and routine daily operations do not require the same attention, skills, or knowledge as a specialized task. One of those components of a risk management program is the JSA. A JSA is a key component to management. The JSA is important because the first step of the JSA is to identify the tasks and activities that require a JSA. As we had mentioned on the previous slide, not everything requires a risk management process. But when we are looking at the JSA and when we're performing a JSA, it's important to look ahead to identify potential risks that may not have been apparent initially. These changes could be due to a change in that scope of work, an increase in the work, a new process or product, a new piece of equipment produced, or even the introduction of a new person. Introduction of new personnel to a task can create additional hazards that may not have been assessed. And whenever we do have new personnel, we need to make sure that we catch them up to speed and bring them into what we're doing currently. It's also important when we're evaluating tasks that we look at the task risk profile to determine the exposures the employee will encounter while performing that work. For some tasks, it's important to look beyond the current environment. Think of outside issues that could impact your work. For instances such as workplace violence or terrorism, it is no longer acceptable to say that it was unpredictable, but that it wasn't assessed. There's too much media coverage right now with violence erupting not only in our country but in other countries to not look at that when we're looking at part of our company's risk management. Especially when so many companies nowadays are global companies, we need to make sure that all of our folks are protected equally. A good way to evaluate potential risks to your company is to observe what's going on in other parts of the country or the world and use those events as lessons learned, even if they did not happen to your company. We need to look at lessons learned from our industry, from our regulators, from the media, and see what's going on out there to make sure that we have thought of and identified every possible risk that there is. When we look at the second line in this slide, we talk about tasks or activities associated with interactions of individuals with each other, equipment, and systems. That particular line is referring to behavior-based safety and human performance. And we're going to touch briefly on that because human performance is a huge topic. Human performance or human factors, there's a lot of controversy what it is and which way the science industry wants it to be called. Behavior-based safety is not new, and it's been around for a long time, and there's many, many people and many specialties involved with it. When we're looking at individual safety profiles, it's really important to consider that when we're looking at hazards in the job site. Most employees go through new hire orientation, they have their task-specific or routine training, they have overview of company policies. However, not all employees behave the same way. It would be great if they did because we could really set up a good safety program, but they have their own individual safety profile, and that needs to be thought about when we're looking at risks to the workplace. So there's 4 areas that employees kind of keep reverting back to when we're looking at that independent safety profile. Following the rules, exhibit caution, aware of surroundings, and stay in control. Are they a rule breaker? We're all a rule breaker. How often do we not quite stop on red? How often do we not use our directional when we're turning a corner? Assuming that everybody else knows that we're doing. Some of those are very minor. But everybody's own personal safety profile will determine how well they're going to follow the rules or they're not. The same with exhibiting caution. Do they double check? Do they count twice before? They measure twice before they cut and all of those kind of sayings? Or do they just jump feet first into the deep end of the pool and see what happens. Those behaviors need to be evaluated. And then are they aware of their surroundings? Many times there's multiple tasks going on at one time. If you have simultaneous operations going on, there could be pressure testing going on, welding going on. Are they so focused on just their task that they're not aware of their surroundings, where they may step backwards and walk in front of a forklift or step into an area that they need eye protection that they're not aware of, or not even care and just be focused only on their task? And then, of course, the emotional factor. Can they stay in control? Can they evaluate a situation? Can they stay focused? Can they not be frustrated? Can they not get in a hurry and maintain that composure to make sure that they work safely? The human element is really a tough topic, and most of these elements are referenced and trained in all of our behavior-based safety programs with a variety of names. But each individual has their own personal risk tolerance, their own safety metric. This can be generated from their lifestyle on the outside of their work environment. They could be hunters, skydivers, race car drivers. They could do a variety of things that when they get into the workplace, what we're asking them to do doesn't seem that risky. One of the concerns is that when they're doing these activities like a skydiver or a bungee jumper, they're the only one at risk. When they behave like that in the workforce, they put their coworkers at risk also. So it's important to kind of look at those safety profiles and be able to assign appropriate tasks or trainings to those folks. So another part of a safety profile that needs to be considered is perception of control. Everybody has their own perception of control over what they're doing. We feel better when we're the driver in the car because we have control of that car. But sometimes that doesn't make us the better driver. It just makes us think we're the better driver. So that lack of concern or that lack of risk assessment is not justifiable or accurate. And then our experience with prior outcomes. If we did something that was a little risky and we made out okay, then now we think that's an okay way to perform that task, rather than retraining ourselves and educating our coworkers the proper way to do that task. So we got to kind of look at those past outcomes also. And then a big one is pressure to perform. There's a lot of pressure to perform in the workplace, whether it's the employee or the contractor. They're meeting deadlines, they're trying to stay on budget, they're meeting timelines. All of those things can add to pressure, which again increase our risk in the workforce. When we're looking at these personal profiles, these safety profiles, we also have to kind of look at the person's behavior. Those folks that are uncoachable, they don't think they have a problem. They've always done it this way. It's never been an issue, and we've been able to skate by without any issues. People that are not happy in their environment. Are they not happy in their environment because they've chosen the wrong occupation? Do they feel that their skills are not being utilized to the fullest? Do they feel that they're being bypassed? Those also can become complacent issues, and those can become folks that are not paying attention and focused on what they're doing, again, creating a greater risk to the workforce. And then, of course, people that will not accept responsibility for their actions, and they believe that everybody else is the problem. These type of safety profiles are things that need to be considered when we're looking at risk assessment. And then finally, one of our most important, and certainly should not be the last piece of information, is leadership. Leadership must be active in a health and safety program, including injury and illness reduction. It is not acceptable any longer for leaders to simply sign the safety manual. For an organization to be truly successful, leaders must be visible to the employees, and they must actively participate and lead by example. They put forth the tone of the safety culture within the company and within the employees. People will behave by what is shown to them and by what they perceive is expected of them. So if you expect them to work safely and you work safely as the example, you will end up with a greater safe company and definitely a safety culture. So as I said, it's my final slide, but it is definitely not the final place within a safety culture. And Dave, I'll hand it back to you.
Thanks so much, Lori. That was great. I would like to also let everybody know that if they look at their screen and see the Avetta logo, that Avetta logo is actually hot linked. So if you'd like to visit the Avetta website at any time during this webcast, just click on the logo and a new window will open up. And don't worry, this will not take you out of the webinar. Let me now welcome our presenter. Ed Folk is a partner in the Atlanta and Washington, D.C. offices of Fisher Phillips. He co-chairs the firm's Workplace, Safety, and Catastrophe Management Practice Group. Prior to joining Fisher Phillips, Ed was the Assistant Secretary of Labor for Occupational Safety and Health. He was named by President George W. Bush to head the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. He served from April 2006 to November 2008. Now, during his tenure at OSHA, workplace injury, illness, and fatality rates dropped to their lowest levels in recorded history. And for more than 30 years, Ed has worked in the labor and employment area, focusing on occupational safety and health issues, workplace violence risk assessment and prevention, whistleblower protection, and accident and fatality prevention. He's recognized as one of the nation's leading authorities on occupational safety and health, is a frequent keynote speaker and lecturer on workplace safety leadership development and other labor and employment topics. He's testified before the U.S. Senate and U.S. House congressional committees on various occupational safety and health issues. Ed is also the only person in the United States to serve as both head of OSHA and chairman of the Review Commission. Also, I'd like to point out that Ed was named one of the 50 most influential EHS leaders by my magazine, EHS Today, several times over the past decade. Ed currently serves on EHS Today's Safety Leadership Board of Directors and on safety committees for the Associated Builders and Contractors, Georgia Association of Manufacturers, the U.S. Poultry Association, and a number of other associations and organizations. So, with all that as just prelude, let me now turn it over to Ed Folk. Ed, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dave, and I want to say thanks to Lori, too, for doing such a wonderful job of kind of kicking into the program that we're going to talk about today. There was a lot of things that she mentioned are really important points to how we really do focus on able to minimize safety and health hazards in the workplace. So thank you to Lori for doing that. So hopefully, I guess I must have pushed the wrong button. Hold on. Stop that. Stop. Let me go here. There we go. I think I got it right. I'm not the most computer wizard. Matter of fact, I'm really lousy at computers. But anyway, but that's because I'm an old guy. But anyway, I wanted to first start off by saying to everybody on the line here, thank you for your commitment to safety and health. Obviously, why you're on this call today, why you're participating in this webinar today is because of your concern for the safety and health of your employees and want to learn how you can do some things maybe a little bit better to try to improve the safety and health at your work site. So it really is an important thing. And I put this quote down here. Winning is not a sometimes thing, it's an all-time thing, from Vince Lombardi, one of my favorite coaches. But it's a very true fact, and it's a very true fact for safety. That safety has to be an all-time thing and not a sometimes thing. And that's, when you really start thinking about it, and you've been going to our topic today, how you're going to minimize safety and health hazards. Well, it's an all-time, it's a commitment all time. So that's why what we're going to be talking about is so important. So I did want to make sure that everyone here got at least one thing that when they finished up listening to the webinar today and observing it, that you got at least one good point out of it that you can use, something you can use, can maybe even take home, tell your spouse about it here. So here's the safety tip of the day. Do that. Never take a sleeping pill and a laxative at the same time. So very important. Very important facts you need to have there. So let's kind of move on, though, and talk about a little bit about this thing here. And actually, to a certain degree, Lori touched just a little bit on this thing, but I put this quote in here because, it's very important that we understand that everyone makes mistakes. I make mistakes, you make mistakes, your employees make mistakes. And part of your job, and part of every safety professional, and if you really think about it, what is the bedrock of safety and health? Where do we start, and then we come put all this other stuff on top of it? And it really is that we got to understand that we're going to have employees that are going to make mistakes, sometimes intentional, most of the time unintentional, and it's going to result in them getting injured. And our job as safety professionals is to ensure that we have the things in place. And one of the things is one of the important things, and this ties in this thing what Lori was talking about, risk management, is that when they make those mistakes, our job is to ensure that they don't get seriously injured or killed. And if that's the basis of where safety started. And we've moved on to that, and we're going to talk about some of the things that we're going to add on these type of onto this thing. So now I put this list together. I use this a lot in a lot of my presentations because I think it's very important. If you want to have a great safety program, and thus you really are committed to eliminating or reducing injuries or safety and health hazards in your workplace, this is what we have to have, I believe. Most companies, and this is the order you have to have it in. Most companies, the order is actually reversed if you look at it there. But you got to believe that it's the morally right thing to having a great safety program, doing the things that you got to do, and your your management people have to also believe that. They have to believe that's the morally right thing to do because it will allow people to go home safe and sound each and every night to their families and loved ones, which you can't put a price tag on. It keeps you from having to do the worst job you would ever have to do, and that is obviously going to some person's house, not calling them on the phone, but going to someone's house and telling them that their husband, their wife, their spouse, their mother, their father, their son or daughter is not coming home tonight because they got killed on the job. And I've been involved with a lot. I've done approximately 400 OSHA fatality investigations. So I've seen the devastating effect that that fatalities have, not only in the surviving families, because obviously it's a tremendous impact. It has tremendous impact, but it actually has a tremendous impact on the company and its employees. And depending on the size of the company, the size of the community that they're in, it actually has an impact on the community. So, and of course it's the law, and we have all the OSHA regulations. But let me tell you something: if you're just meeting the OSHA regulations, you at best will only have a fair safety program. So we need to add the things that we're going to be talking about. Things that Lori talked about there are critical to ensure be able to eliminate or reduce the safety and health hazards. And then finally, it's essential for companies to be profitable and competitive to work in today's marketplace. And that's something. That's where I think if you really want to talk about where safety is kind of going, I think you're going to see in the future, in the next 5 to 10 years, much more emphasis and much more focus on company's safety program and the safety profession to impact the profitability of companies and thus make them more and the competitiveness of companies. So we have a lot of slides, so I'm going to keep moving all through these. And as I understand, you're going to get a copy of everything, so I want you to have. So one of the things when I was head of OSHA, I used to always ask when I would meet a CEO or company presidents, I would ask them this question. I would ask the question to them: what does it cost to injure an employee at your company? And inevitably, they would give me their workers' comp numbers, and so because that's what they knew. And it used to be in the safety profession, it was the general rule was that the true cost of injuring an employee was basically 2 times your workers' comp cost. However, right now, if you look at the studies that have been done, there's been much more focused on this particular issue and a more deep dive into the indirect costs. The direct costs were always kind of known, and here they are, the direct costs are right here, at least some of them. But now the general consensus in the safety profession is that the cost of injuring an employee is 5 times your workers' comp cost. And in most companies, if not all companies, that is a significant number. And it's having a direct effect on the company's profitability and thus competitiveness of that particular in their particular industry. So I think as more and more companies start looking for other ways to reduce cost and thus be more profitable, more competitive, this is where you're going to see it. And I'm not going to go through this list here, but you can see some of this stuff, and it's pretty what you would normally expect to be the direct cost of a cost of injuring an employee. But let's kind of look a little bit more now on more of the indirect cost. And I actually have several slides here on the indirect cost. And these are some of the things that some people will think about, and sometimes you won't think about it there, all these things. But clearly, the lost time from the work by the injured employees, lost time by fellow employees, decreased productivity, efficiency, quality, loss of efficiency, the breakup of work crews, time lost by the supervisors, hiring costs for new or replacement employees, training costs for those employees, replacement costs for damaged tools and equipment, lost time while damaged equipment is out of service, overhead costs while this work was disruptive, damage from incident fire, water, chemical explosions, all that, failure to fill orders and meet production deadlines, lost time, time lost dealing with outside agencies. And I'll give you an example of this. When I was head of OSHA, probably the biggest safety accident occurred was at the Imperial Sugar Plant in Savannah, Georgia, right down the road from here in Atlanta. And I came there. I was there a couple times while the inspection was going on, just to ensure that my people, we had like 6 or 7 people at that site. But let's just look at this real quickly, just so you get this idea about the companies. When at Imperial Sugar, who showed up first? Obviously, the fire department, the police department, the EMTs. Then, of course, immediately after that, the media showed up, and actually some of them probably beat those people. Then you had OSHA was there because we had an area office in Savannah, so we actually were on site in less than 45 minutes after the accident occurred. So we were there. That was unusual, but we were there really quickly. Then we were obviously you had the state EPA showed up because the fire department was putting out the fire and all the water was seeping down from the fire site down into the Savannah River, so they were worried about that. Then the big one came in. The alcohol, tobacco, and firearms came in, and they took over it and treated it as a crime site. Anytime you have an explosion or any type something like that, they're going to come in and they're going to close down your facility and treat it as a crime site until they determine that whether or not it was terrorist related. And then thereafter, I think the next day, the Chemical Safety Board showed up. So you can see that you're going to be dealing with potentially you could be dealing with a lot of different people here. So, bad publicity, obviously, and this affecting your employees, your clients in the community. Your clients, and I don't know, probably a lot of you out there have requirements from your suppliers or from your clients that you have to go through a contract certifier, kind of like ISN or a couple of the others. This impacts them dramatically. Clients don't want to have people who have bad safety records anymore. So that's really a big issue. Loss of orders or bidding rights because for government contracts, legal costs associated with that, possible negligent tort liability, possible criminal liability. So on the bottom line, it really impacts a lot of different things. So that's why I put that here. Now, I'm not going to go through these slides, the next couple of slides. The only reason I put those in there is I want you to use these as a tool. I want you to know as a tool that these are the things when in 2017 when OSHA came onto the site on every site, employer site in the United States. These were the top 10 most frequently cited standards. So you can see that we have particular issues there. There are particular things that are going to be focused in on. And when we're not meeting these requirements, obviously we have our employees exposed to potential hazards. So we need to be aware of those things. I also included my top 25 low-hanging fruit, and once again, I'm not going to go through these here, but these are the things that you really need to take this list because I think OSHA stole the list from me. I think they were on one of my programs one time, and they saw that list and they took it, because I can guarantee you that I can go to any plant in the United States, any facility in the United States, any construction site in the United States, and I can find half of these violations. So, and OSHA is going to be looking at that. Once again, these are things that now we're not compliance, we're exposing employees to hazards, and this is if we were in compliance with them, we would eliminate those particular hazards associated with those specific standards. So I just included this list in here as a tool to help you. You need to go through each one and make sure that the ones that are applicable to you, that you're not, that you do have everything in place. So I'm not going to go through those. I just want to I did want to kind of just point out to you them so you would be familiar with them and recognize this as a tool to help you improve not only your safety program but also to help eliminate safety and health hazards in the work site. So, okay. Now, obviously, having a strong safety and health management system and is very much is critical in having it. And part of this thing is much more moving into what Lori was talking about, risk management. If you ask me what has changed in the safety profession over the last 7 to 10 years, I would have to say that it was a focus away from lagging indicators and going to leading indicators, and a focus on risk assessment and getting away from safety, or doing risk management instead of safety. And here's why safety is dealing with problems when they come up, or dealing with having the items, the required elements that you need to have on each one of the OSHA standards, like lockout, tagout. Do we have locks? Do we have lockout, tagout procedures? Are we doing the training? Do we do annual or periodic inspections? That is safety. To me, that kind of focuses on what really safety is. Risk management, though, to me, is much more focused on identifying problems before they occur, eliminating or at least controlling safety and health hazards that are identified as part of the risk management process. And that's where, like I say, that's where safety has really kind of moved. Now, we've been kind of slow on this. I mean, I got to be honest with people. The insurance industry went to risk 25, 30 years ago. And the reason they did is they were basically doing a safety model. Did the company have its OSHA requirements? Did it have a lockout tagout procedure? Did it have HAZCOM policy? Did it have its safety rules? Did it have a safety manual? They did all those things, and they would benchmark that particular company to determine, did they have all these things in place? But what happened was they were still losing their shirts. Their premiums weren't covering the losses that were occurring. And they said, well, how comes these companies are having these problems? But they have everything. They're supposed to have. Have a pretty good safety program, things in place. And that's when they finally started looking at risk management as the basis for them determining, what is the risk associated with this? What are the risks for this particular client? And what risks do they have out there, in order that we can identify that and determine and price our premiums appropriately so that we're protecting ourselves. So they went to risk a long time ago. But now the safety profession is kind of playing catch up, and we're much more focused on risk, although unfortunately, there's still a lot of companies out there just looking from a safety perspective there. Now, I put these things here, and these should be familiar to everybody on the program here. I mean, if you're not, then we really need to talk. but having a strong management commitment. 1 and 2 are extremely important in order to be able to get to risk management, because you got to have a strong management commitment in order, if you're ever going to have strong employee engagement, you have to have strong management commitment. It's almost like a catch-22, because if you don't have strong management commitment, you'll never get employee engagement. If you don't get employee engagement, you're not going to be able to. You're not going to have the things necessary in place to be able to eliminate or reduce safety and health hazards in the workplace because it kind of falls in that. So clearly we want to make sure that we have this. And, of course, we want to talk about risk analysis, risk management, and Lori did a really good job on that. I'm talking about hazard prevention and quotas because once we identify them, it is very critical that we either eliminate them, which is the most ideal situation, but unfortunately, sometimes there are certain safety and health hazards you cannot totally eliminate. And so we got to control them the best we can. And then, of course, training is very important. And and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. So let's just kind of go, if I keep pushing the wrong button. Get over there, Ed. Okay. Told you I'm not that much a computer whiz. So management commitment, obviously, articulate a safety mission, vision, value. It is surprising me, and actually pretty shocking how many people, companies don't even have a mission, vision, values. What is even more shocking is the companies that do have a mission, vision, value statement, when you look at their value statement as to what their core values are, they don't say one word about safety. And let me tell you, and if you're going to have if you're going to tell people, if you're upper management, you're going to say safety is number one at our company, which I used to get all the time when I was head of OSHA. Senior management, the CEOs and company presidents, that was the first thing that came out of their mouths when they talked to me. And they didn't realize I had looked on their websites to see what their mission, vision, value was, because that tells me a lot about their real commitment to safety. And they didn't have it. And I said, how can you say safety is number one if in your value statement you don't mention one word about employee safety? So one thing you need to go back to, and I'll have these little things from time to time I'll mention you should do, you need to look at your mission, vision, value statement. If you don't have a mission, vision, value statement, you really need to try to work on that. And then making sure that safety is a core value. And you need to understand there can be other core values in addition to safety. And they sometimes if you don't structure them right, they're going to conflict with each other. And I promise you, safety gets the short straw on those things. So we need to be looking at that. We need to define our goals, objectives, and responsibilities. And this is where a lot of companies fall down on trying to improve their safety program and thus, in effect, trying to minimize the safety and health hazards. They talk about goals. Safety is number one. We're going to zero injuries, illnesses, fatalities, all these different things. And these are kind of goals and objectives type things, but they never set the responsibilities of who's going to be doing what. And you can tell employees don't have an accident, but if you don't tell them how not to have an accident, then you're not helping them. And you're not going to reduce your injuries, and you're not going to reduce your safety and health hazards. Because one of their responsibilities, and matter of fact, one of the responsibilities from all the way from the CEO to all the way down to the frontline hourly employee on the site, on the floor there, is one of their responsibilities is to help identify safety and health hazards in their work site. And if we don't have that, if we don't have that part of their responsibilities, if they don't know that our goal is zero, how do we get to zero? Here's what you got to do, Mr. CEO. Here's what you need to do, Mr. Supervisor or Foreman. This is what you got to do, Mr. and Mrs. Hourly Employee on the floor. These are your responsibilities as to help us get to zero, and this is what you got to do. And part of that is always going to be help us identify those safety and health hazards that are all in those particular jobs. And, of course, we got to have consistent policies and procedures, and that kind of ties into the thing about making sure everything's on the same page there. And we work at work sites monitoring for compliance enforcement. And once again, this is the other thing here: safety performance measures, accountability for all managers, all the way from the president all the way down to the frontline supervisor. They should have as part of their overall metric system, which is probably tied into their bonus system, they should be saying, this was part of your responsibilities on the metric on doing this job is is making sure that we're identifying all the safety and health hazards on those areas, in those areas of the facility or whatever that you are responsible for. And part of your responsibilities is to talk to your employees about those and try to identify those safety and health hazards, which is all tied into that risk and job safety analysis that Lloyd was talking about earlier. If we don't do those type of things, we're not going to be able to, we're not going to be successful. I put this thing here just so you can take that. If you don't have a mission, vision, value statement already, take this as a basis of here what you can do, at least from a safety perspective. Now the missions and the visions are going to be a little bit different, but you got to have that. But you got to flat out say safety is a core value of our company. And there's going to be other, like I say, there's going to be other core values. All right. Demonstrate commitment. I won't talk about that, but obviously actions that show commitment, you have to have that allocated personnel and resources, because those are the things that are going to be necessary in order to help identify those safety and health hazards that are in the workplace, and then help eliminate them. Also providing training, and I'll get more into training why that is so important, because, and this is an area I think a lot of companies, we do a lot of training, but I don't think we do a lot of training very well, and that's part of the problem. And we got to reward safe actions there. So once again, this is the other part of the thing, and that was what Lloyd was talking about, the human component there. We got to identify those problems, and we got to reward what safe actions. And for decades, we as a profession were looking at those lagging indicators, and we were rewarding lagging indicators. No lost time injury and illness rates and stuff like that, which had no way of improving our the safety program that we had. But we didn't know that. We do now know it today, so that's why that's so important. So I've talked about the defined goals, objectives, and responsibilities. Objectives and responsibilities define the pathway to achieving the goal. All managers have to have a role responsibility, and we need to spell those things out. This is probably one of the biggest areas we dropped the ball big way. We just assume everybody knows what their responsibilities are, and when we don't talk about that, we need to be maybe even defining them better in our job not our job titles, but the summary or the description, our job descriptions. We need to be talking about what our responsibilities from a safety perspective in the job statements, and you don't see that. So that's another way that we can, once again, helping identify, part of their responsibilities is helping identify safety and health hazards in the work sites there, or letting us know immediately when a safety and health hazard pops up, or when other employees are acting unsafe. These are the type of things that are part of their responsibilities. Now, nobody likes to tell on anybody, but be quite frank, if you're standing by and watch somebody stick their hand into a machine to unjam a box in the machine without locking out, and you're just looking at them and saying, boy, is that person stupid, and you do nothing, and that person gets injured, you're just as responsible for that injury. So we got to make sure that they understand that's part of your job responsibilities in order to help us eliminate safety and health hazards in the workplace. And we got to assess performance. One thing I have a problem with is these people that talk about annual job evaluations there. How does this sound? How does this help safety? Or how does this help minimize safety and health hazards? Joe, today is May 22nd. I'm going to do your annual review here, and I wanted to get back to you because, last August, this is right after you came back from your vacation, I noticed that you were there trying to unjam that box, and you didn't lock out. And, I noticed when you pulled it out, you almost caught your hand in it, but fortunately you didn't. I wanted to talk to you about it back then, but I thought I'd wait till your annual review today. Well, what good does that do? It doesn't do anything there. So we need to make sure that we give feedback in real time, because if they know we're watching, then they're going to be more conscious of the things that they're doing, and that's going to help eliminate hazards. That's going to help more than that. And we want to make sure we don't ignore the small problems because they come into the big problems. If you look at the BP Horizon accident out there on the oil rig, if you look at the report, you'll see that there was a whole series of small things that they didn't do from a safety perspective, which created that tremendous explosion, which almost bankrupted BP. And so this quote from John Wooten is very important. If you don't have time to do it right, when will you have time to do it over? So I think that's very important. Empowerment, then now we're getting employee engagement. And once again, why this is so critical to minimize safety and health hazards is because if you do not have an engaged workforce, safety and health hazards are going to be occurring on your work floor, and you're not going to know a word about it. But if you engage your employees, and we're going to talk about some of this engagement in the next couple of slides about engagement. If you don't do that engagement, let me tell you something. You're going to if you don't get that engagement, then you'll never get the employees involved in safety and health. But if you do get employees engaged, then they will take ownership of your safety program, and they're going to be much more involved. They're going to know where the hazards are. They're going to be able to report those things. So we need to have that. Engaged employees is only by personal involvement. We got to be more focused on trying to get more and more people involved in the process so that we can identify more safety and health hazards and thus eliminate and get them into the process so that we can eliminate them. Back to that next bullet. Management employees have stop work authority. If you don't have stop work, if your employees don't have stop work authority, you don't have a good safety program. And you're going to have problems there. Unless you have stop work authority, they have stop work, and they believe that you firmly believe or firmly committed that if they see something wrong, they can stop it. This is how it went. Well, once again, if they have stop work authority, they're going to see something that occurs. And a lot of times you get stuff, and I think Lori mentioned this, things just kind of pop up. If they don't believe they have stop work authority and they got to keep going, they could get themselves or somebody else injured. So that's why this is so important in order to minimize or reduce or eliminate the safety and health hazards. It's having that ability to stop and say, there's a problem here, and then we can investigate it and determine it. Now, sometimes some people are a little overly sensitive, and seeing something like that. But that doesn't happen that much. And usually what I found are companies that have stop work authority, they don't use it that often. But when they do, sure enough, there was a problem that needed to be addressed. There was a safety health hazard that they needed to address. Having employees and management involved in accident investigations. And this is a thing, if you want to I remember one time when I was head of OSHA, I gave a speech. And after my talk, a lady came up to me, and she was probably in her mid-50s. She said, Ed, I'm a small employer. I have 7 or 8 employees. That's all I have. I'm the safety person. I'm the HR person. I'm the production manager. I'm the marketing person. I'm the sales manager. I'm everybody for my company. And she says, and I don't have the money to be able to afford a safety person. Can you tell me one thing I could do that would help me improve my safety program? How can I help me reduce potential injuries? And I said, I'll tell you what, I'll give you 2 things. And this was the 2 things I told her. I said, first, you need to have a set of safety rules. Get a set of safety rules. Whatever it is. You have to follow all our safety and health procedures. You have to do whatever it is. All these things. No fighting, no intoxication, no drugs, no guns, whatever, the whole list of things. I said, get that safety list together. You can go on the internet, pull up safety rules, and pull up the ones that fit your facility. Just go ahead and get that, put that list. And then when you put that list together, give a copy to every employee and tell them that if they don't follow these rules, that depending on the severity, they may be terminated. We may get rid of them. And I don't care if it's the best person in the company. If you don't follow these rules, if you're the best person in the company, that's not going to protect you because you're going to be gone. That was the first thing I told her. The second thing I said, well, the other thing you need to do, I know because you're less than 10 employees, you're not keeping your OSHA 300 logs. But I would suggest to you that you get that OSHA 300 logs and fill it out. You don't have to send it to OSHA, you don't have to do anything with it, but just go ahead and fill it out. And use this as a tool. And on everything that you put on that 300 log, you do an accident investigation root cause analysis, and when you determine the true cause of it, not the employee was at fault or the employee wasn't paying attention or whatever it was, which may be part of it, but that's still maybe you need the training. We didn't do the training as good as we should have. Whatever it is, identify the problem and then do the best you can to eliminate that. And I said, if you want, that will help improve your safety program. If you want to even improve it even more, take the same thing on your first aid logs. Do an accident investigation root cause analysis and determine what was the cause of that accident and eliminate it if you can. And then the third thing, if you really want to go a big step, then look at your near misses. Now, this is the hardest thing, I think probably in safety is one of the hardest things we do, or to be able to do that, to get people to talk about near misses because they think they're going to be penalized or something like that. But the same thing, if you identify near miss, but for the grace of God, that person didn't get injured or killed, do the same thing, accident investigation, root cause analysis, figure out what has to be done. So, and that's going to build trust. And you know what? That's going to help improve. It's going to have them going to be more involved in reporting this. Here's the leading indicators, and once again, these are things that build up engagement. Are employees using safe work procedures? Do employees assist and develop the safe work procedures? Do they suggest changes to the procedures? One of the easiest things, if you have a lockout, especially if you got a big lockout tagout program and you got a lot of procedures, lockout tagout procedures on because you have lots of different pieces of equipment, get them involved. Get those employees that are in those areas or operate that equipment. Get them to review the procedure every year. So now, because then you meet the requirements of the periodic inspection requirement of lockout tagout. But at the same time, tell me, what do we need to do? Is this thing working? What should we change? Is this actually where you lock it out? Is this where the energy sources is? Is this the only energy sources or other energy sources? Get them involved, and as you do that, they're going to take ownership of it because now they were involved in the development or revision of that lockout tagout procedure. And they take ownership of it. That's how you start getting those things. And at the same time, you're eliminating or minimizing or reducing those hazards. Do employees report correct hazards they found? We need to. The employees, here's another one. This is involving kind of safety audits, asking them how they feel. How do they feel it's safe at work? Because unfortunately, a lot of employees don't want to know that answer to that question. So, I think we got some more. We talked about, and this is what Lori talked a little bit about, the risk identification, job hazard analysis, leading, adding indications, doing audits in-house versus third-party. The only caveat I say about doing in-house or third-party audits, which will help you reduce your or minimize safety and health hazards or eliminate them, if they've identified them, and you got a lot of these, got insurance companies that do these things, third-party audits, all that. If you're having them done, you must do something with it. Do not say, "Oh, that was a nice report." And you got to understand, I get these consultants and particularly the insurance people, they feel like they got to put everything in there in that report to show how good they are and why the money that you're spending on them is well worth it, because look at all the stuff they found. And they put all this stuff in there that actually could hang you. I get clients that get hung because they got these reports that the insurance person or the safety consultant put all this stuff in there that really was just kind of really minor stuff and they never got to it. And now it's a willful violation and they're getting hit for $126,000. So we need to be aware about that. I've told about the accident investigation. I told you about discipline employees for clear violation. We got to have that. If you don't have a disciplinary policy, you'll never have great safety. It just isn't how. Here's some more leading indicators. How are near miss track, preventive maintenance, do job safety analysis, how often our safety perform, how much often the training is done, what is the commitment there? So what's the results? The accident thing. And then, of course, we've got to make sure that safety is considered a business function. And that's probably what risk management does is getting us into that area on that. We got to, and like I said, we want to try to integrate safety into all that. Companies that have great safety do not have safety manuals. They have embedded their safety in their operational manuals. So you cannot do the job unless you do it safely under the operational manuals. So that's the things you got to make sure we're doing, and we want to make sure we standardize language there. And of course, training is very much consistent, continuous education, understanding training, and this kind of ties into communications. That's one area that we really need to focus in on there with respect to safety and helping us reduce or minimize safety and health hazards. We got to train our employees to understand how to follow the rules, how to follow the procedures, and also at the same time, we got to be constantly reminding them, because that becomes a behavior for them to report safety and health hazards. So, and when somebody makes a mistake, when somebody violates our safety rules or has something and didn't follow the rules or procedures, a lot of times we're good about disciplining them, but do we do anything else? No. We discipline them and think, well, that took care of that. No, they obviously didn't know the rules, so we need to retrain them. If anybody that violates the rules, you need to retrain them. That's part of the penalty, if you want to, so to speak, but you got to make sure that way they can't say they didn't understand it. So, how often are we training? Who's conducting the training? That is very critical. You got to have people understand what they're training on. And that helps us help them to understand what they're supposed to be doing, thus not having them create safety and health hazards on the job. So, and I think we're pretty much close there. Oh, what we want to do, make sure employees are reviewing our policies and procedures. Ask for feedback. That's the other thing I think will be, when we're asking for feedback, we're asking, tell us where we're falling down on. Close the communication loop. Communication is really critical there for any program there. And, of course, we're going to be always focused on continual improvement. So, all right, I think we're good there, so I'll move one thing. Remember, bad decisions make good stories and usually make the evening news. So, all right, Dave, I think you're going to take over.
All right, Ed. Hey, that was fabulous. I wish I had you right next to me so you could have written all this stuff down so I could have published it immediately on our website, because you answered about 800 questions really quickly that my readers have come up with over the years. But we still have a few more questions, and we have time to ask a few. I would also like to let everybody know that if you have a question that you'd like Ed, or for that, you could ask Lori as well, go ahead and send it in and submit it now. Even if we don't get to it online during this webinar, we'll let Ed or Lori follow up with you offline. So let me just jump into a couple quick housekeeping things, and then I'll launch into the Q&A. The final installment of this 4-part webinar series will be Mitigating Risk Throughout Your Supply Chain. That's going to be on June 26th, once again featuring Ed Folk. While Ed and Lori are answering your questions, let me just ask everybody to please take a quick moment to complete the feedback form that you will be seeing on the left-hand side of your screen. Okay, let me jump into some questions. This is a question. I know the answer to this one, but I'm going to let you answer it, Ed. The question is, where can somebody find the list of OSHA's top 25 low-hanging fruit violations?
Well, you can't, because I made that one up. This is based on my experience with my clients and things and doing inspection. I mean, I've done thousands of OSHA inspections and represented companies in that many contests of OSHA citations. So I'm real familiar with what they do. It's just amazing. And you got that list, but that list I put together based on my personal experience of what OSHA looks at and what they cite on, and it's easy stuff. And that's why I think OSHA stole it, because they can take that and they can you can go in any plant and find those things. So let me give you one example. If you look at the very top one there, it says do a hazard assessment for PPE. I think that was number one. And in that list I gave you, you're going to get a copy of it. I list the specific standard there. That's been in the rule books for years, decades. Okay, so so you were supposed to be doing it now, and you should do it, because it's an important tool there to help figure out because you got to identify what hazards there are, and that PPE can address: hard hats, safety glasses, earplugs, steel-toed shoes, gloves, whatever. Okay, so you're supposed to do that. And then the next one was that you're also required to have a written certification that you did the hazard assessment for PPE. Now, I would say 50% of the companies in the United States do not have a written hazard, or do not have a hazard, not done a hazard assessment. I'm not joking on this, because every time I get a new client, I ask them about that, and of course they don't have it. But I bet 70% of the companies in the United States do not have the written certification of hazard. They did the hazard assessment. You don't have to have a written hazard assessment. It's so funny why you wouldn't have one. I don't know why you would. But you have to have a certification. It has to say at the top, certification of hazard assessment. It's the only standard I know that tells you what the title of the paper has to be. But 70% of the companies in the United States don't have that paper. So that's why I did. But that it was just that's where it comes from. I got a little bit carried away there.
No problem. Thanks. Let me ask a couple more quick questions here. Well, the questions are quick. Your answer may be a little bit longer because they're great questions. I certainly recognize and agree with your suggestions to conduct safety profiles on your employees. But the questioner asks, but when you do it and you find that the employees won't change their behavior, what would you suggest?
I think that was what Lori was talking about. Lori, do you want to talk about that by any chance?
Oh, sure. So, when you're looking at an employee and you're trying to determine their safety profile and if they're not going to adhere to policies, obviously you want to go through and you want to do coaching and you want to do mentoring and you want to do positive reinforcement. Lots of folks are great employees if they're a good match with their department and their task. However, there then becomes that issue, and we'll use safety glasses as an example. If they refuse to wear their safety glasses and it's an absolute company policy, then unfortunately the company has to decide if their skill is specific enough and in demand enough to keep them with some other type of provision in place, or unfortunately make that determination that possibly they're not a good fit for the company any longer. We have policies and procedures in place for a reason, because it's our job to protect the employee, but it's also our job to protect the company. And eventually, you have to come to that line in the sand. But we always want to start with coaching and, fostering good relationships and hoping to develop that into an employee that does have a safety profile, a strong safety profile.
And of course, you want to avoid. You've got to be careful if somebody's just constantly violating your safety rules, that could, particularly if potentially those violations could cause injury to other people, other employees, or the public, because particularly the public, that could result in you getting a tort negligence lawsuit for negligent retention because you knew the person was unsafe, did not follow the safety rules, that the public was exposed to those potential hazards that were created by that person as a result of that. And so there is some legal liability there. And, of course, I agree with Lori that you want to try to work with them, but there does come a point where you don't need to – if somebody's not following the rules, more than likely they're not going to be your best employee, to be quite honest. The good people are going to follow the rules. But that's why you need to spell out the rules, and that's why you need to train the employees properly so that they know the rules. And if you have this disciplinary policy and they know that you're going to do it, human nature is such that they'll try to go up to the line, but they won't cross it as a general rule. So that's what I would just say about that.
Okay, this is a kind of a direct question. Might be a short answer, might not be. How often do the OSHA safety officers visit the labs of private companies for auditing?
Well, there is a standard on laboratory safety and health issues that you have to follow, and some of the other standards have provisions for laboratories, but like PSM and things like that. I don't know if there's a set schedule. I'll say this. With the change that occurred in 2015 with the record-keeping reporting requirements, which requires it, you have to, if you have a work-related fatality, you have to report contact OSHA, notify OSHA within 8 hours. That's always been there. But the big changes was it said they went from 3 employee hospitalization to 1 employee hospitalization. You have 24 hours to call in. That dramatically increased the number of call-ins. And that, to me, where you have those type of exposures in laboratories, if they get something, that could generate you calling OSHA on that. And if they consider, as a general rule, if it's just one person, they'll usually send you what they call this rapid response form. Don't use their form, okay? Their form asks for too many admissions. Do an accident investigation and get back to them what you found. But don't use their form. Now, in a laboratory setting, if you have some type of exposure or release or something like that, you may have more than one person hospitalized from a single event. If you have two or more than likely OSHA is going to come out and do an inspection. And then you have the amputation requirement. If you have an amputation, which is loss of a fingertip or more, then you have to contact OSHA. You're required to call OSHA within 24 hours of the incident. You become aware of the incident. That they will come out right away. And the last one is the loss of an eye, physical loss of an eye. You have 24 hours to contact OSHA. So while I don't know if that you get that many laboratory, you do get that, the potential is there for every employer to have an OSHA inspection because you're calling them. So it's like that. Now, of course, and that's why having a great safety program too is the other option. The other thing that OSHA is going to show up if they get an employee complaint. And so if you have a safe work site, if you really are conscious and you're really focused on safety and health, and your employees believe that, that dramatically reduces the potential for you to get an OSHA inspection. So, but you still, every employer in the United States still has more liability now because of those call-in requirements where you basically do self-reporting.
Wow, that was a great overview of a lot of things all at once. So thanks so much for that, Ed. And just about everybody has stuck on the line, but we're well past the top of the hour. So again, I want to point out that all these questions that you've asked are going to be forwarded to Ed Folk, and they're going to be forwarded to Lori and the folks at Avetta, who, like I said earlier, will be presenting once more in about a month's time. So if appropriate, they might even be able to work some of your questions, because some of these questions are great, but they're going to require almost a webinar itself just to answer them, such as on safety leadership and things of very large scope. So a reminder again, June 26th, you'll have Ed and you'll have Avetta. And as a reminder to everybody here, if you registered as a group, please add the names and the emails of all in attendance on the exit survey. Let me give a great big shout out and a thanks once more to Ed Folk with Fisher Phillips and Lori Canapi and Avetta. On behalf then of EHS Today, I'm Dave Blanchard. Have a great day, everybody.